Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me comic creator and artist Luke Stone, who is the creator of The Hybrid, The Son of Gods, and a few other titles. So, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me tonight, man. I'm just looking forward to a little conversation.
I am very excited because you worked on a bunch of titles, and I know some of them, and I don't know others. Voodoo Nations, I know, and I love Travis Gibb and everything that the guy does, and I think he's an amazing writer in so many ways, especially with Cthulhu Invades Oz. But I do want to talk about you, and you have a unique way that you got into comics, from my understanding, as you sort of started out in music. And so how did you get into indie comics and creating and really get into art and all that stuff? Because it's super interesting how people get into this.
Yeah, so I've always been into art and comics. I started when I was just a little guy, really interested in drawing. When I was younger, my dad brought home some comic books that a friend gave him to give to me, and I got into comic books right away with that. Always wanted to draw comics. Unfortunately, in the little town that I lived in, not a lot of people were super interested in comics along with me. It was kind of a niche thing. And I didn't, at 14, I wasn't able to, 11, 12, 13, 14, wasn't able to find that group like I had hoped, because you're limited, especially back in the 90s, early 90s. It was, it's not like you could go to a chat room or anything. So, but I started playing guitar. And so I realized that more people connected with the artistic expression of music than they did with comic books. And so I started leaning more towards doing music and things like that. And eventually, even through these different outlets of playing and being semi-professional with music, I still would connect with people that were into comics. And I would try to draw them and do things like that and be a part of that process. It wasn't until I moved to Jacksonville in Florida that really kind of just opened up the door for doing comics primarily as a form of expression. I moved here to become a full-time youth and music pastor at a church. And I was having a seriously hard time finding a band while I was here. So I thought, I don't need a band to draw a comic book. So I started getting back into collecting comics, finding that geek culture here. And it turns out that in Jacksonville is huge. It was, just everywhere. And so that's kind of what got me back in 2014, started doing that. It was actually late 2014 in November. I had been thinking about it. I'd been toying with the idea, instead of trying to find a band, maybe trying to work on comics in some way. But a friend of mine, Gary Dale, his brother Jeremy, who worked for IDW at the time and had done a number of things, had gotten sick at a convention and wound up passing away. And he was just a few years older than I was. And it really shook me to my core in the fact that, here was a guy that I was always kind of okay with not doing comics because somebody from our circle was doing it, and I always wanted to do it. And it was kind of a real wake up call that here's a guy who's only a few years older than me. And, his time here was over. And, when could my time be over? And I haven't yet done what I wanted to do, which was make a comic series, tell a story, tell it in full, and be able to connect with people through comic books. And so that was like a fire lit under my butt, and I started doing it. And that's really kind of how I got into doing that. So 2014, 2015, I really got this kind of tenacious bone that said, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to make comic books. And that's where it started.
And so obviously, how'd you get into it? Because, I'm going to be blunt when I say this. 2014, you couldn't just put out a comic book. It was a very different environment as far as the indie scene, and there was stuff going on, and it was sort of a new idea. And it was being put out, but it was much harder. And you were working on a project, I think, Worst Day, which is dealing with zombie stuff. And kind of an interesting, way to talk about zombie stuff. Not The Walking Dead, but obviously similar to some degree. And you were having a hard time finding even a publisher to put it out. I think you got a writer and art and all that stuff. So what was that like?
Well, it was very, back then making a comic book was a little more complicated. There weren't as many printers that were doing on-demand printing. There was Kablam and things like that. There were still some forums where you could connect with people. It was starting to become, for the tech savvy, a little more available to find other people that were like-minded to be able to create collaborative teams. But I didn't consider myself a writer at the time. And so I had found a writer to help me write this story called Worst Day Ever, based off of a series of blogs that I had written. So I wrote these blogs, but I didn't consider myself a writer. So I hired a writer for this book, and I thought it was going to be like the big thing because zombies were real popular. It was a rom-com, so a romantic zombie comedy, and I like it, but it wasn't as big of so I shopped it around to different publishers because I was still in this mindset that I needed to have a publisher. The whole idea of self-publishing was so daunting, and I had used crowdfunding. Crowdfunding was still fairly new for comic books. A few people had done it and done it successfully, but it was one of those things where it wasn't like everyone was doing crowdfunding yet. And I tried to find a publisher. I could not find a publisher. No one wanted to pick up this book. It was too this or not enough that or whatever. And I get it because I was not as good at the art as I am currently. But yeah, it was like, well, this sucks. What am I going to do here? And eventually what wound up happening was I teamed up with a bunch of other people who also were having trouble finding a publisher, and we decided we were going to self-publish. And we all had kind of this little thing that we were good at. And so we all were in charge of that one thing we were good at, and we helped each other get better at the other things that we weren't so much good at. And we called ourselves Tenacious Comics, and we published a series of books. That didn't last very long. Things kind of got busy in my own personal life, and so I had to hand over leadership more to this one particular guy, and he wound up exploiting that opportunity for his own gain, and wound up causing the company to go under. But through that, I was able to find another publisher that was wanting to pick up Hybrids. So Hybrids was like my secondary idea at the time. This Worst Day Ever was my main focus. It's what I really wanted to do. And I thought that it was going to be the most popular thing, but we did have this thing where we needed to have some kind of action comic. We didn't really have like that superhero type comic. And so I had this idea about the genetic offspring of the Nephilim, who were actually the real life inspiration for the Greek gods. And I thought, well, what if they just kept having babies, and over time it became a recessive trait in people that they could have like this angelic DNA? And what if something happened and it woke up? And what if when people started developing these powers, someone decided they wanted to take these people and enslave them, and so they started human trafficking. And so what if, and so all these what ifs started coming out, and there's like, I'd make a comic book. And so we decided to do the first issue. And it was odd that I thought no one would like it except for a few theology nerds, or a few like ancient alien freaks like me. But it became a lot more popular than the zombie book.
And so since we're talking about hybrid, obviously there's elements of God in there. There's elements of religion. There's politics. There's a whole basket of things that make stories great. In many ways, there's actually real consequences that occur throughout this book. And we're also dealing with sort of average people getting powers and being taken away, and then some of them escaping and powers awakening in some interesting ways. I mean, obviously, we have a character, I think it's Trash Man, and so he was abducted, and then his powers awaken. He escapes and kind of runs into a bunch of other people who are in a similar position. And so what was that like? Because, you said that you're a pastor, and so obviously you have a background in religion, and you have a close connection to that, and then to interject that. But I didn't read this as a religious comic.
It's not. Yeah, I was very intentional. I didn't want to make a Christian comic book because, unfortunately, I look at a lot of Christian fiction as being a little hokey, and it's unfortunate, but that's how it usually turns out. And I didn't want this to be hokey. I did want to interject, my own worldview into it a bit, but I also wanted to tell just a fun sci-fi story, just to do something interesting. And I find that the most interesting stories have a lot of overlap from a lot of different people's lives. And so I try to put those points of view in there. So yeah, we deal with some politics. We deal with corporate issues. One of the guys, Trash Man, in the book, he's an atheist. He doesn't believe in God at all. And so when he finds out that the fact that he has powers is because he is an offspring of an angel human hybrid, he's like, well, now I'm forced with the idea that there is a God. So if there's angels, there's a God. If I literally just just saw a demon, then there must also be, so he's got to try to understand those things and come to, reconcile his own things with that. But a lot of the stories are allegorical. It's like an onion. You pull back different parts of the story and you see different aspects of it. And that's just how I like to tell a story. I'm rather immersive and as interestingly as I can.
And so obviously, I mean, what I like about this is that I tend to be very atheist oriented.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised in Judaism, and so I'm very familiar with, I guess, part one of the Bible, for lack of better words here.
Part one.
But obviously there is an element of Genesis, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this or paraphrase it, but it's the sons of God coming to earth to find daughters of men. It's sort of an impetus for some of this stuff with the angels and all that stuff. And I love religion as to read it and understand it. And I love religious, crusading and all that stuff. And I find that stuff as a historical element to be beyond fascinating. Yeah. And so I know that there's not over religion in here for those who are concerned, but even throwing that in there and that history, and anybody who has any small background understands certain elements of it. And so I think it's a really nice touch to have that in there, because it does get to the point where angels and humans are breeding and then their offsprings have powers. Yeah. But things get more complicated where, Goddeth giveth, Goddeth taketh away.
Yeah.
Well, is another major theme in this entire comic as well, where
it is. There's definitely gain and loss that is, that keeps coming back through, because that's life. It's, I'm working on part 2 of The Killing Field right now. And in one of the scenes, we're talking about trying to resurrect. There's this character called the Necromancer. And so without trying to give away too much, there's a scene where she's talking about, well, reanimation versus resurrection is different. I can't give life. It takes life to bring back life. Reanimation, it's like there's no life there. It's just animation. But that kind of whole everything. It takes something. It takes a life to give a life. It takes a measure of this to bring back a measure of that. And
equivalent exchange is a good way to put it.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if you're an anime fan, but Full Metal Alchemist really sort of elements this where they try to resurrect their mother, and one of them loses their entire body, and then the other loses an arm and a leg, and they still fail. Yeah. And so it's super interesting. But I think equivalent exchange kind of gets the point super across.
Yeah, it takes a lot of that. And I like history. I like, all of those studies. And the truth is that whole verse in Genesis that you nearly quoted verbatim. Very good job, by the way. That is not just found in a Christian religion, but most monotheistic religions will bring up something similar to that. And even some of the polytheist religions will bring a similar instance kind of to light with some of their readings and things. And so for me, for it to span a lot of these different religions, and for us to have historical writings of about 1,500 years past this idea of these Nephilim creatures, to have these Greek gods and all of those things, it sounds eerily familiar to those things, and you've got people like John Smith with Mormonism who says it was an angel that brought him the golden leaves, and how some of those stories and how that can connect in with the story of the sons of God and what the Watchers were supposed to be, but what they wound up becoming. And you can connect all of that with some of these stories of ancient aliens and pyramids, and all of these weird things kind of come together. And when you start to draw a thread between some of these things, and instead of, I know some people, they draw that thread and it's always like that one dude with the hair, it's aliens. I'm telling you, it's aliens, right? But what I'm doing in this story, I'm saying it's angels. It's angels that missed the point and did their own thing. And so it all comes down to just mischievous angels doing their thing, basically.
And then even going off of that, though, I mean, there's also an element of human will and free choice. I think it is very much in here, where these people, obviously, angels have created the problem, and they're responsible because they obviously probably deviated from what they were supposed to do, which was not have sex with humans.
Basically, yeah. They couldn't help themselves.
And then humanity kicks in, where you get this idea that, okay, these people have power, and we as a corporation, as a group, you know, much like society operates to some degree today, that they, you know, say, okay, let's take advantage, or let's use this for our own personal positions.
Oh, yeah.
And so now we have that, and then we also have people banding together. They're very much like, you know, the mutants being persecuted in X-Men.
A little bit, yeah.
And so now we get that idea of unacceptance and things of that nature, and also freeing your brother in many ways, and liberation. And we could talk about, you know, Plato and Aristotle coming out of the cave, which is my favorite thing to talk about. And so that's what I got out of this, is that you now have to free people. And then also Trashman, who's an atheist now, is questioning the idea of God at the same time. A lot of shit's going on in this book.
A whole lot is going on. It's the quintessential team book. I mean, there's a lot of personalities, and I try my best to develop those characters slowly and organically throughout the storytelling. But it is one of those things where it comes down to people that were supposed to do better didn't. And so now it's up to us, and we're ill-equipped, but we're going to do our best. And so basically we're telling kind of that story at the same time. We're looking at what we see it's exaggerated. It's, you know, because it's a comic book, but we still have the problem where corporations look at things as a means to an end. How can we exploit this group of people? How can we make money off of this? How can we make money off of that? And at the end, you know, so at this core, you kind of see that happening with this corporation called the Hybrid Engineering Corporation. You see that happening, but then you're also revealed that the head of that is his. And as we go into this next arc, you're going to find out that his motivations for what he's doing really are kind of petty, you know, that it's really out of self-insecurity that he's even doing what he's doing, you know.
And to even go further off of that, because obviously I think in issue 4 of the first arc in the first series, we start figuring out what the Hybrid Engineering Corps is, and obviously these characters have to face the truth of what they are, what they're meant to do, their origins, and a variety of other stuff. And so obviously a lot of these characters go through growth and are tested. And when you get hit with the truth and you have nothing but to accept it, you know, it's also saying, what do you become? What do you evolve into? What do you grow into? And so super, super interesting concept in of itself. When you take even the religion out of all of this and all the politics, and you just treat it like what it is on the surface with all this stuff.
Yeah, and it comes down to choice. It comes down to choice, really. And through the story, I try to show like what these characters' choices are. You know, even from the good guys to the bad guys. You know, antagonist to protagonist. We look at, you know, you can't control a lot of these outside elements, but you can control your choices, and that's what I want people to remember as they're reading the book. They can see these characters making certain choices. Some of them are very much in line with their character. But it's always, for me, I think it's those choices that we make that's especially for a bad guy. So if a bad guy's we expect them to make bad choices, but it's when they make a good choice, you know, or we find out like, oh, the choices they've been making, it's been because of coercion. They've had to make those choices because, you know, I'm a big fan of the show called Criminal Minds. And in one of the episodes, there's this guy going around hitting people and shooting them, right? He'd wreck their car and then he'd put 2 bullets in their chest. And they're like, well, why is he doing this? You know, why is he doing that? Well, it turns out that this other guy had his wife tied up and was going to kill him if he didn't do it. Was going to kill her if he didn't do it. So it was, you take a life or I take her life kind of thing. And so there's an interesting aspect to that. Like when it comes to someone that you loved, what are you willing to do? There's a quote that says that it's not whether or not he goes, I think it goes something like this: everyone has a monster within them. It's not what type, but to what degree. And so I think that is the kind of an interesting concept as you're developing characters, that all of us have a monster that do live inside of us, and it's not what type of monster, but it's to what degree of monster we have. Like, is it bottled? Is it under control? Do we have it chained away, or does it run rampant in our personality? And so I like to write smart stories, and I think that Hybrids is one of those stories that is that way, that that it's bigger and deeper than just the few issues that it's already got out. So,
and speaking about that, so there's the 5 issues, which is the first arc, and then you actually published a graphic novel, which is Hybrids: The Son of Gods, Trash Day, which is sort of a special edition. It's got a bonus story in it, Saraphia's expansion story, which adds more context to it. I think, as well as an exclusive end credit story as well. And so obviously if you get that graphic novel, you get more content in there. And so what was that like to continue to add more into that and have it as a graphic novel? Because I'm a big ClickFunnels fan of Russell Brunson, and his entire philosophy is that you have to be the most expensive or the most valuable. And this adds value.
Yeah.
To the max.
The whole time I was making the issues. So when I started the arc, it was, let's do issue 1 and see if people like it. So for me, issue 1 is more like a 0 issue. And then issues 2 through 5 are actually my 1 through 4, like the bulk of the story. And so when I put that together, I was thinking from the beginning that I eventually want to take all of these and put them together into one big volume. But not only do I want to just put them together in a book, I want to add extra content that you couldn't get before and make it special. And so what I did for this volume is I wrote the Seraphina backup story, which introduces a character that is actually rescued in part 5, in issue 5. And then we do the end credits scene, which sets up kind of what the new threat is going to be in the next arc. And I also brought in a bunch of writers and artists to do 2-page backup stories, so that you can get an expansion to the universe. Because I don't want the universe just to be what you can get. I wanted to build upon that, and then I wanted to give people backstory and like, hey, this is what was going on when this happened. This is the process for this, and things like that. So putting that volume together was a lot of fun. It was neat to do and to finally get out to everybody. Because it really does tell part 1 of the story, kind of a 3-act story. It's act 1. It's volume 1 of the 3 volumes. And it's, it distinctly tells, like, this is how this whole thing starts. And then this next arc is called The Killing Field, which I got part 1 out on Indiegogo right now. I've got 10 days left on that. And it really thickens up the story about what's going on, really kind of what's happening with the villains, and what's happening with the relationships with our good guys. But this arc is action packed. I mean, there is a massive battle. Obviously it's called The Killing Field, so you're going to get that, we live up to that. So that battle actually starts at the end of part 3 and is finished at the end of part 4. So our last battle takes an issue and a third to tell. It's quite massive.
So it's a Dragon Ball Z battle.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, and there's story. There's development that happens during the battle, because you learn more about the dynamics of the bad guys and the good guys. You see them try to position themselves in their own hierarchy in the midst of this battle. You see, you kind of get some of the motivation. You get why the good guys are the way they are. You get to understand this. There's 2 normies, that we call them normies, on the good guys team, on the Watchers, where they don't have any superpowers. but they fight with the veracity of people that can lift buildings, because and they make a difference, and that's intentional to show that, look, you may not feel like you have powers, but your fight, your voice in the mix makes a difference, and so we show where these guys, they make a difference in what they do. And so I'm pretty excited about this next arc. It is some of my best writing and some of my best art, so I'm pretty excited.
And even to just give a little more background, from my understanding, this is 6 months after the first arc. Yes. And so obviously these characters, everything that happened in the first 5 arcs, it's 6 months after. Yeah. They have battle scars. There's real consequences. And they're now dealing with a bunch of stuff out on a battlefield, getting closer to their new objective, which I'm purposely leaving ambiguous.
Yes. So the way I write these stories is I tend to do, an arc is usually over the course of a day or two, so it's not like a drawn out period of time. It's a very condensed story, because what I want to go back and do is, in between those volumes, I want to tell side story. So we can go back and do the
we're going to talk about this.
Yeah, we can do the Rogue Ones, or we can do, those kind of stories. There's bits of story that I leave open intentionally so I can go back and tell it later. And so, but these are the main points. And so there's been 6 months. There's been a lot of character development that you don't get to see. And so you kind of get this kickstart. I'm like, oh, well, this is what's been happening with the characters. This is the relationships that have been built right here. This is what's happening to this point. And so Trash Day was over the course of about 48, probably about 48, 36 to 48 hours. So it's just a couple of days that they really were together. And so you can kind of see that accelerated growth in the characters, their relationships, because of that. But now, because they went through that, we have 6 months of things that have been going on with them that have created who they are now. And so we get to see that relationship, because before, when they were fighting with each other, they didn't know each other very well. They're fighting alongside each other, but they didn't have that banter and that relationship. Well, in this arc, they do. They have background. They have things that they're building off of. So you can kind of see some of the humor in there and some of those things happening. And so when this ends, the next arc will again also take place probably 10 weeks after, not quite 6 months, but we're looking at it being about 10 weeks, that, from end of part 4 of the Killing Field to part 1 of the In Between. So
to even talk about this, because I think this is super interesting. I don't know if you know Tyrone from Soulverse and his universe concept, and Aaron Dowen also has a universe that he's created, and a few other people have created universes. And this is, I think, the way comics should be written. If I ever enter this sector, I would like to create a universe, because I think it's super interesting when you actually go that route. And it allows for a variety of stuff. It allows for easy building upwards, because when you build your first thing, then you can build on top of it, and you already know characters. Yeah. I'm a big fan of the Avatar: The Last Airbender series, and it's very easy for me to get into the Kyoshi books that came out, get into the graphic novels, and get into Korra very easily, super, super easily, where I don't have to even think or process. And so I like when comic creators and writers and anybody does that, because it makes my job easier, especially when you get me invested. Yeah. And then you build out a bunch of stuff like what you want to do, which is all the side stories that gives me more insight, but isn't a necessity, but just expands the universe. Yeah. And I think that's the right way comics should be done. I think that the major companies can learn a thing or two from that as well.
Well, yeah, I think they've done it for a long time, and I think that's really where indie comics has struggled, is because it's difficult to build an entire universe. Like when you look at the Marvel universe or DC universe, like that some of these stories take place in the same area, and that some of these characters and stories can overlap, that they build together. When you You know, it's an easy thing to explain why someone has a power in Marvel. You just say, well, they're a mutant. Like, oh, okay, well that makes sense. There's mutants in this world, you know, or they're a super soldier, things like that. And so you can explain some of those things. There's rules within that universe that we already know because they've been around for decades, and we've already experienced those things. And unfortunately, there are too many, in my opinion, indie creators that avoid the difficult work to build that universe because it does take a long time.
So let me ask the question: why do you feel that indie creators don't, want to build universes and put in the work? Because I feel like a lot of these creators give a damn about their Kickstarters, and they care, and then they're passionate enough to say, hey, I want to have a successful project. I want to tell these stories, yet they don't reflect it in their work. Is it that they don't have the skill set, or is it too hard, or are they just want to do 6 issues? And then
I think they absolutely want to. I think they want to do it. I think they want to put in the hard work. I don't think that it's a desire not to. I think that it's a pressure to get out and tell the massive story right now. Like to make people get out and care about the characters. The real story that I want to tell with the Hybrids universe is actually our 3rd arc. So basically our Act 3. That's what I want to tell people. And I could have started out the story by telling that, but no one would have cared about the characters or the universe or any of that. And so I knew that I had to invest the time, and it's so expensive to make a comic book. And it's so difficult to build an audience that is going to be with you. So I've got about 100 or so dedicated people that will back and support my campaigns right now. And that is after 5, 6 years of working hard on comic books and trying to build this universe and all of that. And there's a saying, it takes years to become an overnight success.
Takes 10 years.
Yeah, it takes years to become an overnight success. And so there's still a lot of work to do. But by the time people are introduced to the Hybrids universe that it is, like, so this year we're releasing an RPG game, and I'll release 4 issues of the Killing Field, and I'll release the trade paperback for it. So in that time, there probably will likely be another 50 or 60 people that will come to know about Hybrids that have never known about it before. And so it takes a while to do that, but they will come to know about it because I've built this thing. And so when they are introduced to it, they've got all this backstory. So anybody that comes into issue 6 or part 1 of the Killing Field right now, they've got all this other backstory. But there was a 18, 19 months where I wasn't able to do any comics at all. So from issue 2 to issue 3, there was a big gap. And so there are people that stayed with me from issue 1 to issue 2 to issue 3. And it's difficult to try to get people in our current culture to follow you when you're trying to tell a big, massive story. And you're trying to learn the process as well, because, many of us work full-time jobs. We don't know all the skills or possess all the skills to be able to do it. I've grown as a writer and an artist over the course of this. So by the time people get to issue 7, issue 8, issue 9, they're going to have a much more refined story, a much more refined art style, much more refined creator than people that started with me at issue 1. And I think that's the thing. Because you're uncertain if people will follow you that long. So you try to give them the best you've got in a smaller package. Many publishers for indie books, they won't publish a 9 or 15 comic arc. 4 issues, 3 to 4 issues. That's what they'll do. Because that's what they might be able to sell, because the people are so fickle with what they're into. And if it takes too long to get that issue out, it could, you could lose people. And I think that's why the creators do what they do, because it's incredibly risky to say, hey, the story I'm going to tell, it's long. There's a lot to it. And so mine is probably 13 to 15 books. We're not certain yet, but it's looking more like 13 to tell the story that I really want to tell.
So, I have a very different position where I think people want long-form conversations now, and I think there's been a massive shift into that. I think people want graphic novels and not single issues in many ways. I'm a comic collector. I am not a comic reader. I am a graphic novel enthusiast, meaning I will drop like $150 a month on graphic novels, and I will tear through them all month long, and then I will do it again the next month. And I've had months where I've done that, and I've enjoyed every second of it, and I wish I spent more money. But it's not because, it's not that I don't want to buy the issues when they're coming out. It's the fact that for $25, I could get 10 issues or 8 issues all at once. Mm-hmm. And so I think people want longer stories. And I think people want, more content, and they want to digest it. And obviously, I'm both in the mainstream as far as interviewing people, and I've interviewed top people from DC and Marvel, and I've also done everybody from indie, and I think most of the indie people are wrong. And then I'm openly willing to say that because it's crystal clear to me that a lot of people now are coming to Comic-Cons and they're presenting graphic novels saying, "Could you sign my book? It's the first one I've ever read." And they're not bringing a comic book anymore. They're bringing a graphic novel.
Yeah, I think there's a market for both, because I have people that with my last campaign, there's obviously the graphic novel, but I had the floppies available. And I've sold more of those floppies now after having the graphic novel than before I had the graphic novel, which is odd, because I think people do like the floppies. They do like going back and reading in those kind of chunks. But there are people that they want more material less often. And then there's people that want less material more often. And so I think the way to do that, and I might be wrong, but it's what's working for me, is to do individual issues and then compile them into a graphic novel. So I can get the people that are only interested in the issues, and then I can get the people that are only interested in the graphic novels. I think that will work. But yeah, there's definitely a market for both, and it's not either or. It's both. It's this and that, because we see that.
And then to even go off of that as well, because also there's a whole digital market as well.
Yeah.
And digital is massive now. And I'm in a lot of Facebook groups. I don't know if you are, but this was popping up maybe 6 months ago where you were saying, "Oh, I don't prioritize digital." And I think a lot of those people missed a huge boat, and they all had to sort of walk it back a little bit, because digital is massive. And COVID has only perpetuated that in many ways, because a digital thing is instant if it's cheaper than a physical copy. I have an iPad. I just got my iPad 6 weeks ago, right? Okay, I love my iPad. I read more digital than I've ever read before, and I actually have a subscription to Comixology now, and I'm tearing through stuff left and right because it's cheap, and whether people like me or not, on that point, it's right on my tablet. It's accessible. And so I'm a big digital fan.
I got to tell you, I do like selling digital because it's 100% profit, really, compared to a book. If I sell a book, so if I price out a floppy, this book is 32 pages self-cover, so 28 pages of content. I have to price that out at $6.99. And I'm not making much. I'm making about the same as if I sell the digital for $2. So if that, kind of how that works out. And so I like that. But I see more people going for physical now than digital. I guess it ebbs and flows. There was, 6 months ago, a year ago, it was digital copy, like all day long digital, and hardly ever any physical. And now, my last campaign, I had one person do digital, and I've only had 2 people buy digital for this campaign out of the 63 people that have backed it so far. So it's a matter of trying to meet all of the consumers' desires and needs, and so it's going to come down to kind of the people that are supporting you and the people that you're connected with, but it's meeting all of those needs. Like, DC and Marvel, what do? They do digital, they do physical floppies, and then they do trades, because that's what consumers want, and different consumers want different things. And so I think, unfortunately, sometimes indies will be like, this is the only way to do it. This is the only thing to do. I never offer digital. I never offer this or I only do it. That's just, from a business point of view, I think it's foolish.
I agree. I think people who don't use their ears are foolish.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There's a saying. It's my favorite saying. you have one mouth and two ears for a reason.
Oh yeah.
And you know, there's been plenty of times, and I've been doing, you know, interviewing for almost 6 years now, and best thing I ever did was shut up.
Shut up and listen. Yeah.
It's the best thing I've ever done. Occasionally, you're right and somebody's wrong, but more times than not, I am not correct. Now I'm a little bit more correct because I'm experienced, but my first 2 years, not correct. I would say I was correct 1 out of every like 50 times, which is not a good track record, everybody. That's a 2% track record.
Well, I think it also goes, you know, it's not even just that, you know, it's things change so quickly. I think people were really interested in digital before the pandemic. And now people aren't interested as much in digital, at least from my point of view. The people that are supporting me, they want their hands on physical copies because there's a nostalgia to it. They enjoy that. You know, they've got the trade, they can get the trade, but they also want the floppies because now people are starting to collect. I had this guy, and I got to talk about this. I had this guy, his first comic book that he has bought in years was.
I love these stories. Stories.
The first comic book he has bought in years was my last campaign. I try to put issue 1 as a you go ahead and get issue 1 for this amount of money and I'll ship it to you. It's a test the waters perk. I didn't quite do it on this one. And maybe I should have. I've got 10 days. Maybe I could do that, but I've still got that up on demand for the other campaigns, so you can still do that where people will just buy issue 1. So this guy, he does that. He gets just issue 1, and fulfillment time comes, and I send it off to him, and we're having a little trouble, you know, getting the because of the mail. It's getting there on time, and so we go back and forth. I'm like, no, it's on its way. Here's where it's at. Give him tracking information, and the day he gets it, he's like, I got my book, and he opened this thing right away, read it right away, and immediately went on and ordered the rest of the books, like ordered them. And he's like, I have not read a comic in 20 years. This is my first comic that I've bought in 20 years. And I love it. I absolutely loved it, which gave me the warm fuzzies, you know, gave me goose pimples because I'm like, I did something that made this guy passionate about comics again. So we get him the rest of the books. And I'm telling you, and then immediately, as soon as I launch this campaign, he's over there getting this book. He's like, I can't wait. When is part 2 coming out? I'm like, he hasn't even gotten part 1 of the Killing Fields yet, and he's already asking for part 2. And I'm like, I am working my buns off to get it out as fast as I possibly can.
What is that like for you that you've now created a loyal fan? Because there's a saying in business that I think you only need 1,000 fans, true fans, and then you'll be set for life. And yeah. So very much because, especially if it's like monthly or even quarterly, you know, you'll be set for life. So what is that like, knowing that you've built a base, that you've built a customer base, and that now you know that you need to find like 100 more people like him in many ways, where you now have an audience member and you have a perfect customer in your head is this guy.
Yeah, there's a lot of emotions that go with that. You know, the first thing is like, seriously, little old me. There's that, you know, it's very humbling when someone, you know, feels very passionate about something that you create. It's kind of this weird kind of euphoria. Then there is this excitement that I've created something that you're excited about. You're capturing what it is that I wanted you to be able to get. And that is amazing. For me, the business aspect of knowing that I need, you know, 300 steady loyal fans like that to keep this a sustainable thing, 1,000 to make it a livable thing, is actually secondary to the fact that I was able to do something that made this guy passionate about comic books again. You know, it's like, that's a special place, you know, to know that every comic book has the potential to be someone's first comic book, you know. And I remember when I picked up my first, it was issue 3 of the Secret Wars, 1985. I was a little kid and I saw Hulk on the cover. Beneath 1 billion tons of, 1 million tons of rock stands the Hulk, and he's mad, and I just fell in love with comic books. It just became my, this thing. I loved them. And in that book, I remember when I had lost that copy, I went out hunting for it and I finally found it. And when I got that book, it didn't matter what the price tag on it was. It wasn't very expensive, but I would have paid any amount of money to have that book in my hand again, because it was precious to me. And to be able to be a part of that process for someone is worth more than any amount of money I could ever make off of doing this, just to be a part of that process. But from a business standpoint, it feels really good to be able to connect with people in that way. But then there's this tremendous amount of pressure to keep bringing it. It's like I have an obligation to this guy to bring my best work every time I do it.
And also, it must also make you feel really good that he is sort of, I don't want to say difficult because it's not a nice thing to say in this circumstance because this is a happy story, but he is saying, hey, where's my book? Where's my book? And then you realize why. And you're like, oh, this makes complete sense now.
Yeah.
So that happens in life sometimes where somebody's like, person's being really difficult. Why is this person torturing me? Oh my God. And they're like, oh, they care behind.
Yeah. Well, I care about every person's, delivery that they get.
You know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. I totally get it. Yeah. And I'm like, so it was, some people might get a little annoyed by that. I mean, if every one of them say, where's my package at? I'm happy to deal with that. But yeah, it was his first time ever supporting anything on Indiegogo. It was his first time supporting any kind of crowdfunded comic book. And there were so many firsts there that I was totally cool with it. And it was like, yeah, but now he has faith in me to produce the book and get him his books and try to get them to him on time and everything. And so it's just this, it makes it all worthwhile. All those little, the issues that you come into creating and the back and forth, the, trouble with files, the this, that, all that tedious stuff to make a comic book. It makes it all worthwhile. It really does. But yeah, absolutely love it. So.
And to even speak further, because we've already mentioned it a bunch. Obviously, your team Indiegogo, and then I've spoken to Tyler James about this, and obviously his position and my position are very similar. Where I think the war between Indiegogo and Kickstarter is absolutely foiled, and they're on the same team, and they purposely want a war. And everybody on whatever side you're on wants that war because it generates money. I think that's part of it.
Yeah, I'm not a one side or the other on that because I obviously right now with Terraform Comics. So I'm one of the owners of a company called Terraform Comics, and we have our first book called Enter the Continuum that is live on Kickstarter right now. And so we're using that. And shortly we'll have Voodoo Nations #2 live on Kickstarter.
We're going to talk about that too.
Yeah. I like Indiegogo because of some of the features.
That's the point of the question in many ways. Yeah. Why do you go Indiegogo versus Kickstarter? Because they're different. They have advantages and disadvantages each. I
used to run them both. This is my first campaign where I have not run both. So I would launch them both on both platforms to get both of, Now there may be when I get to part 2 of the Killing Field, I may do part 1 and part 2 on Kickstarter, as well as Indiegogo. But I like Indiegogo because of the secret perks. I like Indiegogo because it takes your money out right away instead of waiting to the end, so I don't have drop pledges. I like Indiegogo because of the add-ons. It's more streamlined. It's they've been doing it longer. I like Indiegogo for basically those reasons. But I like Kickstarter because if you pledge $1, then anyone that follows you sees that you pledged for this campaign, and so it brings it up in the algorithms. They both have their good points. They both have their bad points. When people's like, well, people in Indiegogo don't fulfill. Well, there's a whole lot of people in Kickstarter that don't fulfill too. The problem is creators exploiting people's generosity and not fulfilling. That is the problem. And so,
Kickstarter, my first Kickstarter was exactly that, and took the guy 24 months to fulfill, no stretch goals, book came damaged, and I didn't back a Kickstarter for 3 years.
Yeah. See?
So you want to talk about how many people were hurt in that position. That's a lot of people if you think about it. And the person hasn't run a Kickstarter since, and they're an Indiegogo, and they're a horrible person.
Yeah. So I mean, you're going to get them both. You're going to get them in both places.
That was a Kickstarter, by the way. That was Kickstarter. Yeah. So yeah. Enough with that BS, everybody.
Yeah. I've been a part of more than 20 campaigns that have fulfilled. So funded and fulfilled through crowdfunding. 12 or 13 of those are mine personally. And so it's all about working with people and pointing out the people that not only fund, but they fulfill, that they meet their obligations. I helped a guy who I was partners with a while back who was 3 years unfulfilled. We couldn't do all of the things that he had put. And so he wound up refunding people that wanted a refund. And then everybody else, I helped him make sure his book got printed and got fulfilled, so everyone at least got a copy of the book that they had asked for. So it was late, very late, but I wanted to make sure that people saw that there were creators on those platforms that were trying to do their best to make sure the customer, the backer, the pledgers got what they asked for.
And I do want to mention one thing, because I like this person a lot, actually, and you know this person. And they've done some merch for you, and that's Kanan White.
Yes.
Kanan was on this show. I don't know if you knew that. And
I didn't know that.
We went 2 hours. He was actually recommended to me by Zenescope, of all people, because I have a relationship with Ralph Tedesco and Dave Franchini from Zenescope. It's a really cool relationship. And obviously they recommended him to me, email and all, and that one went really cool and it was awesome. And it was right after Jason Metcalf, of all people, as well.
Yeah.
Super, super cool week that I did, like 5 interviews and all 5 powerhouse interviews. But obviously, how did you two meet up and how did you two connect? Because obviously there's some merch there and he's done some stuff.
Yeah. So I used to draw digitally, traditionally, and I had I'm from Indiana. And I was friends with this Indiana artist named Kanan, and he would post these videos of him warming up on his drawing tablet. And it got me really interested. I was like, man, this dude is phenomenal. Number one, it doesn't look like digital art. It looks like traditional art, because all that digital stuff was like, you warp the lines and it was real clean and static. It didn't look very organic. But his stuff looked really organic and nice. And I was like, okay. So I'd watch these videos every day and had no idea that he was gaining the popularity that he was as an artist. I was just a fan of this dude's work. And so it came to the point to where it's like, I just want to get a cover done from this guy. I want him to draw me a cover. So I had some money set aside that I knew was going to go towards buying a high-end cover for the trade paperback of part 1. And I just thought, I'm just going to get a hold of Kanan and see if he's available for a cover. And he was. And so I hired the dude. He's a tremendous professional, great work, and can't sing his praise high enough. Love that guy.
Such a good artist, so fascinating, amazing history, amazing interview that I had with him. Arguably one of my top 20. So I do want to mention him because it's super interesting, and even like, what is that like? Because you do get that privilege every once in a while as a comic book creator that you can go out and get somebody that you like their artwork and that you get to have a cover of theirs. And sometimes, and more often than not, especially in the indie scene, some of these top artists are very much available. And a bunch of them are now coming in, like Sun Kumanaki, who was on my show, Jamie Tyndall, Jason Metcalf, Elias Chazus, Ebass sometimes, Niai is in the game. I mean, I'm dropping some serious name drops here for those who don't know. Arguably, possibly J. Scott Campbell at some point, if for the right project, might jump into this.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities for very talented artists now to do covers for, and some of them are even willing to do. If you've got the money, here's the truth: if you've got the money, you can get just about anybody to work on your stuff. It does come down to that, but but some of them are easier to work with. In my opinion, better to work with. I recently just had a cover done. In fact, that's our variant cover for The Killing Field by a guy named Nitho Diaz. And he's been known to draw G.I. Joe, and he's done a number of covers for IDW and some other groups, and tremendous artist. Very easy, very fun to work with. Made another one of those that just made the process so simple. And what I can say about guys like Kanan and guys like Nitho is they engage in helping you promote the work that they've done, which is nice. I could tag Kanan anytime I needed to for his work, and Nitho actually has shared and retweeted and the cover that the work that he's done to his followers.
I think that's super important, in which that's something that I think some artists understand, is that they need to promote the Kickstarter, even though it's not required. It helps everybody in so many ways.
It is the difference between hiring one guy to do your book for $400 and one guy to do your book for $300. When it comes to a cover, it's like, oh, I could pay this guy $300, but if I give this guy $400, he also helps promote. So that's likely it's going to bring in more money. And so, if you're an artist that's doing those, as a creator who hires cover artists, your engagement in the campaign makes a huge difference. Like Raj Mahan and Jim O'Reilly, who do a backup story in my newest book, they both engage in promoting the campaign and sharing that out. And so their audience gets a chance to see that there's something they've done in this book. And I don't have to be the only one that says, hey, check this out. They help me get other people get eyes on it. So do you feel that when somebody else says, hey, this is a really cool project, that affects not only your audience more, but also other people's audience? Because there's a theory of earning your way in and buying your way in. Yeah. And it's kind of like, if I keep telling you, hey, man, I got a great podcast, but if my friend says, yo, he's got an amazing podcast, all of a sudden my friend's word means something more because it's not his product. It really does. When it comes to the recommendation of other creators means a whole lot to me. I'm not sure about other people because I can't really speak to their experience, but to me, if someone recommends someone, I'm going to take that recommendation before I will anything else. Like there's an artist that he was a little bit out of budget on this latest cover, but he came with a great recommendation from 2 or 3 other creators that I work with. And so he is on a short list of people that will be doing covers for me. So as soon as the budget is there for that level of cover, then he could be the first phone call, because he comes with recommendation from these other people.
That's how certain people are on my show, is that certain people are recommendations, and other people I just look up and I just go on art station. Oh, it's really cool. Yeah, it's a mixture. It's a mixture.
Yeah.
And then some people approach me, and I love when people approach me, because when people approach me, I don't have to look for you anymore.
Yeah.
It makes my life easier, and you could be a horrific artist, and I'm more likely to say yes if you approach me, because it is hard to find people.
Oh yeah.
And so, having said all that, obviously the RPG is going to be coming out, and I don't know much about that, so that's exciting. I would imagine.
I'm working with a guy named Nicholas Tockard, and he has developed a number of different games over the years. One of them is Big Stompy Robots. A very fun game, role play game. And I had I've always had this idea that I wanted to do a role playing game. I want to do a board game. I want to do these different immersive aspects to the hybrid universe. I want fans to be able to own it. I want them to be able to create a character the way that I do and play them in a world in their own. Because I've got this whole sandbox living in my head. Like there's this whole thing in here, all this stuff happening. And I want to share it with everybody. And so Nick has seen and heard everything that has happened. He knows things that are happening in my head that nobody else knows. And he is probably the only other person that I could say not only loves hybrids as much as I do, but maybe a little bit more. And he has created a world, a mathematical world, to be able to play play as a character. And so we are ready. We're looking forward to launching this year. We'd hoped to launch last year. Everything is done. Now it's in my hands to make it look pretty, set up all the pages and stuff. So as soon as I get done with some of the art that I'm working on, I'm in between those things. I'm working on getting these done. So we look at some point this summer to have the quick play out and then the full manual done and have that out. So very exciting. If you are into die type theater of the mind type role playing, you'll love this. You're gonna love it. He did a great job.
And obviously there's a bunch of other stuff coming out, and I'm going to give you a chance a little bit to self-promote all of this. But I do want to talk about Into the Continuum by Terraform Comics.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you're involved in that.
Yep.
And one of the things, obviously, Tenacious Comics didn't work out, and it was meant to be what I am guessing is a co-op.
Yes.
Sort of like everybody owns it, or they own their title under it. And so I'm super curious because I think this is complicated. Like Image is sort of like this, but they're not. Because the second you publish your book with Image, you're in debt to that company until you meet a certain threshold. And it's pretty much every issue you're in debt to that company until you meet a certain threshold.
Yep.
Minus Saga and The Walking Dead. Those are probably the only two you're not in debt from starting point because they made bank for that company.
Yep.
But what is a co-op and what is your ideal version of that? Because it is tricky on indie comic rights and who owns what and what you own, especially because I think it's coming that Hollywood's coming knocking sooner rather than later.
Yeah. So the co-op idea was that it was truly, we kind of took the idea from when I was doing music and how we would have a particular group of artists would use a label name. And we created our own label and everybody had their own job in there. And so some people were really good at PR. Some people were really good at booking tours. Some people were really good at production. We all had our strengths and our skills that we did. And so that's how we wanted to approach the comic book industry was let's take that model and let's build this co-op where we all are in charge of something and we do that job for everybody's comic equally, not just our own, but everybody's. And so it worked really well for a while. And it is difficult because everybody owns their own thing. And what will happen sometimes is it was really important to have the right people in place. Because sometimes people will promote their own stuff a little bit harder than they will everybody else's. And it kind of went against the standard of what we were trying to do. Like they needed to promote everybody's stuff equally. And so you've got to really make sure you're choosing the right person, the right fit for that. And so ideally, and kind of like the perfected version of that is what we're having right now at Terraform Comics. So we have 5 founders, but we have 7 people that are kind of our core partnership. And we all have our own responsibility that we do collectively for the entire group. And one of the ways that we can ensure that we do that is through this book called The Continuum. And so kind of using our brothers and sisters to the east in Japan and their very popular comic book model like the Shogun Run and Shogun Run Jump and things like that. Those kind of models where you take it's not an anthology, but it is a shorter story told over a number of issues, but those shorter stories are compiled into one issue. And then those are sequentialed out, and serialed out over a couple of months. We're using a similar model for what we're doing through the Continuum. So Terraform Comics creators will create these these little mini stories that are told sequentially. So instead of having a 24-page comic book that's told over 5 or 6 issues, you can break that down into 6 to 8 pages and do that over a number of issues. And so it allows the creators to create at a higher level with less financial responsibility and less time restraints to be able to get the product out to readers at a more timely, in a more timely manner. But then it also gives the readers an opportunity to be exposed to great stories at a higher rate. And so that's kind of what we decided to do to kind of really bring in that whole co-op mentality.
And so obviously that allows for a lot of promoting because if you're promoting your story only in the book, everything's attached in the book. And so as a result, therefore, it promotes the entire book,
Exactly.
even though you're only promoting your stuff because you promoting your stuff, since it's attached to the book, is the byproduct. So if there's somebody named Tom in the company and Tom's only saying, hey guys, I wrote this really cool story in this book, and they don't promote your stuff in the book, it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
They're going to get your stuff too. Whether they read your stuff or not, well, you can't control that.
Yeah, that's up to them. But now Tom is working for the co-op rather than just working for himself like he normally would. So it does eliminate that. And then it gives us the opportunity that everyone is going to promote and try to elevate equally.
And then it also casts a much larger net in many ways.
Yeah.
Meaning that, it's now, instead of one person promoting it or you and an artist promoting it, it's now 10 people promoting it.
Yeah, an entire team. And I also like to look at it this way. So let's say, for instance, you and I both had a book and we were going to do a 24-page self-cover, and we had another person that was going to do that. If I'm trying to promote that one book, I know that I'm going to hit X amount of people. My net is going to go so far. I'm going to be able to bring in this many backers. And I might say, hey, Andrew, let's cross promote. Can you tell some of your supporters about my book, and I'll do the same for you? And so we do that, and it maybe brings in a couple of people, because they're like, oh, I'll give Luke's book a chance. I'll give Andrew's book a chance. And the other person does the same thing. They'll give them a chance. But now if I said, hey, what if the three of us just took our book and put the first 8 pages of our book all together in one issue, and then we got all of our people to buy that book? Now, instead of like people taking a chance on whether they're going to support those books or not, now they're supporting you, Andrew. Your fans are supporting you. But at the same time, they get a chance to read mine and the other guy's book. So now they're getting that exposure, like you were talking about, that natural exposure. And so now they're going to, so we have a better opportunity of sharing our work with more people and exposing people to more stories that way. And so we're pretty excited about it. We think it's going to work. This is no one's done anything quite like this. Rob used to do a thing called The Advocator, which was similar to it, but it was still an anthology. They were 4-page standalone stories.
A bunch of people were involved in The Advocator.
Yeah.
That Into the Void was into it.
Mm-hmm.
And Joseph Deuce, I think, had some stuff within it. And a lot of people were part of that. But obviously, that's something that's different as well.
Yeah, it was never intended to be a sequential thing, to where the stories continued on past that issue. We're releasing a book every 2 months. So in 2 months, another book will come out. Book 2 will come out. So we've got 3 books full. We're looking at filling the 4th book now. And so this year we've got 4 books of the Continuum that are going to go out. And from those, we'll launch standalone series. Now there's going to be an audience built in for that first issue of a standalone series that, we didn't have to we were able to build organically, that we didn't have to force. And so we're looking forward to it. It's pretty nice.
No, it sounds like an interesting idea. It also sounds very much like it is an experiment, and that it could be a shift to some degree. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see how people react to it.
We say that we're trying to change the landscape of comics, and we didn't want to just do the same thing everybody else was already doing, because that wouldn't be changing anything. I don't want to just mimic what Scout does, because Scout's doing a really good job of what Scout does. That's not what we're trying to do. So we wanted to do something that no one else was doing. We felt like there was a part of something there that was good. There was the ideas and some sparks of that, but that we could take it to another level. And this might change how indie comics presents new stories. We hope.
And obviously that's a little bit of time away. And I do want to talk about Voodoo Nation. Because Voodoo Nation, obviously, the first one came out, and that also has an element of cross promotion in it. I think with Mojo Rising on that side, and it was a connecting cover, and it's an interesting way to how to do that, and it's kind of what you were describing before. But also, you did a lot of the art. That's obviously Travis Gibb. I got his name right. Finally, I always add an S onto it.
Yeah.
And he knows I had an S onto it. And that's my dog, everybody. She's a princess. And she's not big. She's like 13 pounds. I want to make that clear. But anyhow, so what was that like, A, getting called by Travis, and then even working on Voodoo Nation? Because you're a pastor,
Mhm.
and obviously he's dealing with Christian missionaries and some stuff going on down in South America.
Yeah, it's a cool book. And so Travis and I connected over the summer last year, mostly, through crowdfunding. He helped me with one Kickstarter I was running, and with the company I was working on. He had pitched this idea for a story, and it was okay. It was more superhero centered because, like, I've got this other idea about voodoo. And he sent me the pitch, and I go, "Do you have an artist for this yet?" And he goes, "No, I don't." And I go, "Yeah, you do." I said, "I want to draw this one." And so I was pretty excited to get in because it was something different than what I had been doing. It was a story that I liked. The character seemed very compelling. I was really interested in the villain, Bishop Lucas. And so we started this, and I had no idea how popular it would be. And it has been the most fan arted character in book that I have ever been a part of. Like, there is fan art of this all the time. People drawing Bishop Lucas. I've never seen that. Like, I've got all these other like characters from hybrids and stuff, but Bishop Lucas and something about that story just speaks to people. And so it was fun to get involved with that and to work with Travis. Travis is a tremendous writer. He's a great promoter. And so there's a lot of, extra that you get along with just working with a good writer. You get the opportunity to really try to spread your reach as far as you can. But there's on the surface, it's just a really good story. But below it, there's like these other theological things that if you have that background, like Travis and I both have a background in ministry. The editor, Andreas, he has a background in theology, and so there's these layers. Once you can pull back those little layers of the story, you get more. So there's more to it than just on the surface. On the surface, it's a really cool story. It's a lot of fun. But then below, there's even more there for you. So it's been fun to work on. And issue 2 is drawn. It's being colored right now, and will launch very, very soon.
And to even go further into this, because obviously this is a book and Travis was on. And so we could talk about this where there was a risk with it where Travis stated he was a little bit, concerned how it was going to be received, given that it's got that undertone of Christianity in it, and how he actually brought like a Christian expert into it. And so what was that like? Because this is very different, and it does have that tone to it. And so what was your concerns going into it?
Well, the concern is that, it's a book called Voodoo Nations, right? So people that are expecting a book about voodoo may not like some of the Christian undertone to the story. And people that know me for being a pastor or know that, that's kind of what I do, may not understand that, the title of the book and what it is and how the nuance of Christianity is in there. So you run the risk of alienating 2 audiences. And so your hope is that you will reach 2 audiences with this, but you run the risk of alienating both of them. And so there's kind of a risk in that, so there was a challenge to that, but it was all in the marketing. It was all in how you explain it and how you bring it forth. I think it's interesting just to tell the story of these young missionaries that think they're doing the right thing. They think they're there to help, and but they're ill prepared. Like, they're working in a top-notch facility that has been built for them. They've got all the resources, but they're still ill prepared. That's one of the things we try to show visually. You can see that, wow, this is a really nice setup, but at the end of the day, that doesn't matter. You can have all the tools financially and naturally that you could have, but if you're not prepared for your enemy, for the person that you're battling against, like Bishop Lucas, he's smarter than them, and he's more scrupulous than them, and he's evil. But he's also got this. He's also kind of got this pastorly feel, but only in his own darkness, which is weird. It's kind of this. It's so cool to tell the story, and when people see it, when they read it, they get it, and they're like, "Oh, I know what you're doing. I love this." So we've been very fortunate. Rather than alienate 2 audiences, we've now gotten two audiences excited about it. And so I'm really looking forward to the second issue and how that is done. Some of my best work that I've done is on this book. It took me a long time to draw some of these pages, to get the scenes right. I used photo reference after photo reference of New Orleans. I wanted to create New Orleans as a character in this book, and just to try to get it right. I tried to put in enough detail to where you knew it felt really detailed, but also to do it in a way to where it could be done quickly and not take me years. But yeah.
To put it bluntly, there's a lot of shit that goes on in this book.
Oh yeah.
To put it bluntly.
Yes, there is a lot of running, and we're in New Orleans, so it's outside a lot, around buildings, and so there's just so much detail.
And so, and I don't want to ruin anything. A lot of stuff's coming out with it. Obviously, Travis and me spoke about it a lot in the first interview, and it's an intense book. I read the first one; it's intense, and I'm gonna leave it at that. And Travis tends to do that a lot with a lot of his books.
Yeah, the first book was pretty intense. Usually a second issue is harder to follow up. It's easy to have a good first issue. It's hard to have a good second issue. And I think Travis rose to the challenge on this one, because it really does increase the risk. Like, even though like it's a little different, you can definitely tell that something's not quite right.
And I don't want to push any further, because I want people to actually figure out how to get issue 1 back issue 2 when that comes out, because that's going to probably come out sometime this year.
It is. He's currently running Broke Down number 4 right now, and so as soon as he's done with Broke Down, we run Voodoo 2.
And so obviously that's going to come out, and I'm sure Travis, and maybe you'll join Travis, but we're not going to push. We're not going to push that, and we'll do that interview, because that could be fun, talking about all this way more in depth.
Yeah.
Having said all that, though, I do want to talk about conventions. Obviously, 2020 since March has been a nightmare. I think it's safe to say the entire con scene has been torpedoed, and pretty much their battleship is sunken. And we're almost approaching a year now, because it really started mid-March.
Yeah.
So what has that been like for you in this sector? Because obviously I would imagine you do good at cons to some degree, and obviously conventions work, and it's a good way to meet fans, see who's buying your book, and actually get a demographic, as well as also just feel an audience and also sell to an audience.
I do very good at cons. It gives me an opportunity to meet new people. I have a tendency, some artists are like, well, I let my art speak for itself. Well, I speak for my art all the time. There's so much noise out there. There's so many opportunities for people to spend money on something. I want them to really get excited about it. So I try to share my enthusiasm with it. And so conventions are a great way to add new readers, to add new people to the mailing list. And without that, it has been a tremendous challenge to try to reach new people. We've found interesting ways to do that online through streaming and things like that, but nothing replaces the human contact with the fan. I also don't do much original art online, so I'm able to do that through sketch covers and things like that in conventions. And so there's been a lot of missed opportunity for me and for some of my fellow creators to make money. And we felt it hard.
And so even going off of that, where do you think cons are going? Because obviously, with COVID, vaccination is starting to roll out, but we all know it's not going to roll out smoothly. It's going to be a long path. I mean, my parents are a little bit older, and they're now starting to get eligible to receive the vaccination, let alone, getting it. So
it hasn't been a smooth path for people to get that. And even when people get they're saying that even if you get the vaccine, that we can't go to no mask, we can't go back to not social distancing and things like that. So everything that we're currently doing still has to continue to happen even with the vaccine. So I feel like these larger cons are not going to be as popular or as effective as some of the smaller one-day or short weekend cons. where it's more like toys and collectibles and things like that. Because I've been to a couple as a guest going in that have been very, very well attended, and they're better prepared to be able to meet those crowds. I don't know how many people are going to want to go to something like a MegaCon right now, or somebody's going to want to go to a Tampa Bay. I hope that they will go because we have tables at those. But some people are still afraid to go out. Some people still won't go to restaurants, you know?
And also, do you feel though that like, so a New York Comic Con, a San Diego Comic Con, those do over 100,000 collectively. Do you think that they're going to be capped and that this is never ever going to return back to that level for at least for a while, because con credit is real?
Yeah, con credit is real.
So it's like, and I think people recognize that this wasn't safe before we started all this, and now it's ultra not safe.
Yeah, I started out talking about Jeremy Dale, and he got con crud and passed away. That's how he got sick. Was he caught something at a con? Definitely not this year, but probably not even 2022. Probably 2023 before we start seeing some semblance of normalcy back at conventions is my best guess. Of course, I'm a novice, but I think part of the thing is, these big conventions, when they bring people in, the other thing that is, it's high tickets to get in. And I think that we're about to experience some negative financial aspects to our finances.
I'll break down the economics really quickly. So the way it works is that a lot of these celebrity guests have guarantees. So they might have a 50 grand guarantee. That means that for every autograph and every photo they sell and every high ticket they push out there, that counts against their guarantee. So that means that if they do 55,000, they make 50,000 plus that 5,000 of autographs they sold. But if they only sell 45,000, they're guaranteed that 50,000. Now, your ticket goes to covering that guarantee to make sure, along with the space as well as the volunteers and any paid staff and the venue costs, if I didn't already mention that. So that's what your ticket goes to. Now, all of a sudden, if we're in a bad economic situation, which we're going to be, no question.
We're already starting to get there.
I mean, 45 days is what I'm betting on. And I have money in the stock market. I have money set aside, neither here nor there. But it's coming. It's coming in 45 days to 3 months, give or take. So obviously when that happens, and all of a sudden going to a con is a luxury. It's not a necessity.
Well, even that, like look at fuel prices. We're starting to see the fuel prices go up already. And I'm not a proponent for one politician or the other. I'm a proponent for like what averages are. I like statistics. And so for the last 4 years, the average gallon of gas was $2.50. Prior to that, for the prior 8 years before that, it was $4 a gallon. We're already starting to see gas prices go up. And so when gas prices go up, that means people travel less. When people travel less, they're spending less money. And so all of these prices are starting to go up. And so what happens is when someone goes to a convention, they have to pay for the ticket, and then they also have to pay for that autograph at that table, And so what happens is they allot their money to meet the celebrity, and they don't allot their money to buy the comic from me because I'm not a celebrity. No one knows me. All right. So when they come to me, if I'm able to capitalize on that, that is a bonus. But most people that come into those larger conventions are not there for the artist alley. They're not there for the small publisher. They're there for the celebrity. And so what will happen, in my opinion, as I foresee it, that those conventions they cost a whole lot of money for a table at one of those conventions, that you'll see less and less of artists being able to do that. And I see the face of those larger conventions changing, and I see the future of really fruitful conventions being these smaller one-day events that you can drive to in certain areas. And I kind of see that that's where my future is going to be anyway.
I think it's going to be there as well, in which I think that there's going to be, somebody said it really well, there's going to be more cons that are 1 days and they're going to have less people.
Yep.
Because I don't foresee a big con ever happening again the same way. And also, I mean, there's a whole issue of, cosplayers and other stuff happening as well. And so it's a whole, ball game of circumstances. So really, really, really interesting stuff that's going on. So I think it's super, super, super interesting where it's all going. But yeah, so that's how I view it. But I definitely agree more with you on this than I disagree.
Yeah, I think and again, like my focus is on travel, just basic fuel costs and what that's going to be, what some of the decisions have been and kind of where that's leading us in the trajectory of things. I think people are going to travel less. And so those closer conventions, those little small halls are going to be the future, I think.
And so, I mean, I think that's exactly what, and I think that the people who adapt and understand that and figure it out first are going to do okay. And I think everybody else who gets there last is going to be okay, but not great. But on that note, I do want to give you an opportunity to promote yourself because we've been speaking for almost an hour and a half.
Yeah. You can find me on social media. Just go to lukestonestudios.com. You can get my social media links from there. You can also find the Indiegogo links that I've got up. So I do have a campaign that is in demand right now on Indiegogo for my first 5 of my trade paperback. And I've got one that's live for another 10 days for issue 6 or part 1 of The Killing Field. It's live on Indiegogo right now. And so just go to lukestonestudios.com, check that out. And, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Facebook, find me on YouTube and all those good things.
And I've been saying it to everybody. I said it about 2 hours ago, and I'm going to say it again on my last interview and on this interview too, that you have to support indie. It's super important, and the best way to support indie is financial. That doesn't mean you got to go spend $100, but if you see a comic and you like what's in it, drop $7, $8. It's super important. It makes a difference for creators, as well as you got to back the Indiegogo, got to back the Kickstarters. And if you're in a financial situation where you can't back it, what you then should be doing is following people on social media, because that is super important and it makes a big difference. Email lists, signing up for somebody's email list is massively important as well, because that also does make a huge difference. So seriously, if you can't support economically, support on social media.
Absolutely. Yeah, I try really hard and for all my campaigns to make it the value there and to make it affordable. So with this one, you can get a book shipped to your house for $12. So unlike some campaigns where it's $20 per book or something like that, we really try to make it reasonable for people. There's digital options and things like that, and most creators are trying to meet that need for people. They understand that financially, not everyone has the means to be able to do what they would like to do.
Well, I was going to give you the last word, but I think that's perfect. So I'm going to give you the last word still, though. If you have anything else you'd like to add, be my guest.
Be sure to check out be able to check out the Indiegogo, and then make sure to go by and check out Enter the Continuum on Kickstarter right now. Yeah, absolutely. It's good stuff. You're not going to miss out on it. So
couldn't have said it better myself.